Welcome back to Media7. For most of the last decade, Canterbury University's Bill Rosenberg published a fascinating annual report called News Media Ownership in New Zealand. But the 60,000 word effort in 2008 was his last. Happily, the job has now been taken up by AUT's Centre for Journalism, Media and Democracy, which recently published its own version, the New Zealand Media Ownership Report. In this week's Source, Sam Mulgrew looks at the landscape it found.
In a worldwide poll, 59% of people were concerned that the news would be distorted by financiers pushing their own agendas. And according to a new Kiwi report, the last 3 years have seen public service media shrink, commercial interests grow, and more of what you read, see and hear become foreign-owned. We rely on our mostly Australian bosses doing well, but more often they don't. Fairfax filed a large loss in the year to June 2011 and has sold off a 35% stake in the Star Trade Me. And after buying MediaWorks, Ironbridge Capital still faces a more than $500 million debt on the deal. We've just lost the New Zealand Press Association, which leaves 87 countries an independent press body, every developed nation except us. Journalistically, we're just the 7th state of Australia. All 4 big companies in our media market are foreign-owned. Most are owned by financiers and moguls like Rupert Murdoch. The Murdoch empire has an ever-growing grasp on over half of our homes. Sky's ad revenue, subscriptions and profit are all up. His monopoly goes sky high. And the best rebuttal from public service TV advocates who are paddling upstream, a subtle Facebook protest. But for now, who cares? We've got the rugby.
Sam Mulgrew there. I'm joined now by the report's author, AUT PhD researcher Meria Mulilati, and former MediaWorks CEO and current director of the Devon Fund, although he prefers to be known as a part-time radio host and consultant, Brent Impey. Welcome to you both. Meria, why pick up this work after Rosenberg pulled it down? Why was it important?
We felt strongly that this is an issue we have to discuss and have a debate. And if you look what's going on actually in the UK at the moment, I think this is more topical than ever.
Is the issue the degree of foreign ownership or the degree of concentration of ownership? Because it could be looked at both ways. Of
course you can. If you look the ABN, Fairfax, MediaWorks and Sky, they're all foreign owned. But this report is actually highlighting the fact that we are more concerned about the concentration of the ownership. If you look at our media market is dominated by these 4 companies, so we are concerned about that concentration, not so much that they are foreign-owned companies. But I think if you look some years back in New Zealand, these companies were more standalone businesses. And now they're much more owned by these financial institutions. If you look, for example, MediaWorks, Ironbridge is the huge venture capital firm, and they have their own member sitting on their board. So you can see actually in practical terms what the impact is.
No, Brent, we should bring you in here. You were the CEO when Ironbridge, a private capital firm, purchased MediaWorks. Do you think that ownership model, particularly in light of the recession, became problematic?
The only issue, I think, in respect of MediaWorks was that it was sold in 2007 at the height of the market, and there's been a recession. I mean, I fundamentally disagree with the thesis that's been put forward. I mean, it fails to include TVNZ, which, after all, has 60% of the television viewers in New Zealand and over 60% of the advertising revenue. And I don't think you can do a study of this type and just exclude the major player. So that's point number one. Secondly, concentration of media is concentration of business in New Zealand. This is a 4.5 million size market, and it's not just 2 newspaper groups, it's 2 telephone companies, it's 2 breweries. You go on and on and on, because the third player in our market always fails. And so you've got to look at it from an economic perspective. And the other weakness in the argument, I think, is that there is virtually very limited access to capital in New Zealand. I've tried many, many times to raise substantial money in New Zealand, say to run MediaWorks, the float, for example, and we just don't have those resources. So the choices are, you either have cottage industries, which was certainly the case of radio in the 80s and possibly the very early days of television, and definitely the very early days of newspapers. If you want the resources, you want to get the quality, you want New Zealand to have a world-class media, unfortunately the capital has to come in from overseas. And as to concentration, I don't think there's any choice. Now, you correctly said in the question, it's been concentrated for many years.
Mary, I'm going to go to you with that. I mean, the argument here is that if we depended on local capital, our media market would be much smaller. There would not be so many media organisations. We would lose diversity.
Yeah, I agree with that this is a small market, but I think, we still have to think that, what are the implications if we just have a few players? What does it actually mean for the content and journalistic work? Just look what's going on, for example, in Fairfax at the moment. They're cutting heavily costs and they outsourcing the editorial work. They're doing all, they're getting rid of the non-core businesses. So I think it's very important to highlight these issues, I think.
Yeah, and I actually want to go back to you, Brent, with the MediaWorks and Ironbridge issue, because when you look at that business, it lost you as CEO, it lost Jason Paris as CEO, in the middle it lost that Australian guy, whatever he was. That does not speak of a business that's a pleasure to run. I mean, I spoke to Jason Paris and he pointed out that when he went to his board, he basically went to Ironbridge, who had really no interest in running a media business. They had no interest in the future of the business. Is that not a problem?
Well, look, I disagree with that. I mean, Ironbridge or any other...
Why'd you leave then?
Well, look, I'd done 10 years at that job. I'd had enough. So I was happy to leave. It's not about me. It's about where the money was. When we put MediaWorks up on the block in 2007, when Cam West needed to sell for its own reasons in Canada, I clearly recall that the top 20 potential purchasers were all offshore private equity type operations. There is just not the money there. Now, it's different to look at it now in 2011 and say, well, they paid too much. Anyone can do 20/20 hindsight vision. I don't really think that's the issue. The issue is, and if you go back to the point that was just made about Fairfax, the reality is that people are reading newspapers less. These companies, both APN and Fairfax, have just written off massive amounts of money, millions of dollars in terms of their brand values, because people are moving online. The real challenge isn't about concentration of ownership. It's for these newspaper groups is how to monetize the move to digital, and that's a challenge, and you need resources to do that.
And yet, those resources weren't there, but because for 10 years, both those big newspaper chains remitted money back to Australia. In Fairfax's case, to keep the Australian Financial Review afloat, now there are no reserves.
No, that's not true. No. Fairfax paid $800 million for Trade Me, which was a massive investment in New Zealand. Sky Television, for I think the first 10 or 11 years, never returned a dividend. It ploughed everything back into the business. In the case of the Canadians, during the period I was at MediaWorks, they ploughed a lot of resource into that business. So I just don't accept the argument. It's too facile. It says naughty foreign owner who comes in, buys it cheap, and remits all the money overseas. It's just not the background to it. And my view of it is that the foreign owner, in many cases, is better than the local owner. And I can give you a few examples of that.
I think the key issue here is that the business models are failing these papers. They as Brent said, they're moving from a print environment to the online environment, and they don't know how to make money on the digital platforms. That's why you see, actually, for example, the Fairfax and APN, they all buying these companies, group buying sites, because I think that's where the golden goose is. So
there's nothing wrong with that per se, surely, that APN owns Grab One, Fairfax owns Trade Me. It's just sensible business, isn't it?
I don't know enough of that business, but I'm just highlighting the issue that they are moving to, because they have to find how to move from that print environment to the new kind of digital world, and find that, as Brent said, the monetizing. How do they monetize that? How do they make money on these new digital platforms? Because they're not making on print, money on a print. Look, the New Zealand Herald, if I understand correctly, this report is making heavy losses. So it's a shift from this, you know, from the print environment to this digital environment, and they have to find the ways to monetize it.
Yeah, and my argument is that you need the resources, and it comes back to capital, and that capital can only really be sourced from overseas to do that. And I do know a little bit about that daily deals market, and it is a tough market to make money. And while all of the groups are in there in some form or another, it's not easy. And in fact, the business cycle of daily deals is possibly already matured and on the way down.
Can we get to proprietorial influence? Because we've seen that played out on a fairly grand scale with the Murdoch thing this year. Do you think that happens here at all?
Well, in the 30 years I've been in media, and it's, I suppose, 25 of them running it, never once did a foreign owner apply any influence in terms of editorial content in the news. Occasionally there was the odd backbench politician who got a bit upset and would try something on, but they were fairly easy to deflect. There are actually worse examples locally where a local business or a local associate, this is a very small village, and I mean I can recall one situation where at TV3 we ran a story on the son of a close friend and business associate of mine, and he put enormous pressure on, legal and other, to try and get that story dropped. Now that was, and cost of friendship, that was as extreme as I ever experienced, and a foreign owner would never think about that.
Can I just make a point that if you look, you can't actually pinpoint exactly that this banker here is actually, you know, has an impact to this editorial decision here. What happens is, for example, when I was in London working as a journalist for the financial newspaper, the paper decided to cut, you know, 1/3 of the editorial staff and kicked out 1/3 of the journalists. What happens then? Rest of us were actually left shoveling the news. So we were producing 4 to 5 stories a day, and I'm not very proud of those stories or quality of the story. So the impact is actually coming that way. So you can't actually pinpoint directly that this guy is actually saying that, do that, but it comes because of the, you know, you don't have the resources, you don't have the money, how they allocate the money, and normally it's not the journalist or the journalistic department where the money is allocated.
Just finally, one question for both of you, just briefly. Do you think that in the current environment, with all the realities we've talked about, that public broadcasting has become more or less relevant?
I think it's relevant. I think I'm a very big supporter of the MTS model, and I think that can grow. Obviously, there are issues concerning other public television. To be honest with you, I think that a deal was potentially possible. I like that concept that John Barnett came up with for TVNZ and RNZ, and I think there was a little bit of lack of lateral thought in response to that, Russell. I can see how that could have been made to work to begin with on a very, very small scale. In respect of public radio, I think it's about right for our size. And the problem we've got now is the money is the money. It's not just broadcasting that has to tighten its belt. Everywhere else in the economy does for very obvious reasons. But in respect of public broadcasting, yes, my gut feel is that has been an opportunity lost.
Mary, a very quick response from you.
Yeah, I think if it boils down to the choices that, you know, do I watch My Kitchen Rules every evening, or if I have something else, then, you know, there's your answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Miriam Mulalahi and Brent Impey. Now, when our Prime Minister shared the joke with Australians this week, it's possible that only one of them was laughing, because things are not going well for Julia Gillard, and her own public broadcaster certainly ain't helping. Who'd be Julia Gillard? Not only is the Australian Prime Minister's support tanking on every side, but her sea of troubles is the central joke in the satirical TV comedy the ABC's At Home with Julia. Well, that and how much of a pathetic loser her real-life partner Tim Matheson is.
I'd be delighted to accept the position of head lice
Task
force manager.
They've nailed the lookalike factor, most notably with lead and co-writer Amanda Bishop and Nicholas Cassim's spooky Tony Abbott doppelganger. But opinions have varied widely on the quality of the humour. The ABC's own website columnists were split.
At Home with Julia is inane drivel of the most idiotic kind.
I personally think it has an understated charm, that it's both sweet and funny.
Drop that one, God, Tim.
But then came This Week and the shag under the flag. That did something you cannot do in Australia. It was perceived as disrespecting the diggers.
Yeah, we find it offensive. That'd be enough. It's a total disrespect for the flag, which, you know, soldiers forever have given their lives under it.
The Prime Minister repeatedly assured the nation she would not be watching.
Look, Lisa, I won't be watching it and I'm not intending to comment on it.
And despite the episode being headline news, most Australians didn't watch it either, which may be the only time this year that the embattled Ms Gillard has managed to be on the right side of public opinion.
Everyone's feeling most satisfied with the outcome.
Indeed. An ABC spokesman has told reporters that this week's fourth episode of At Home with Julia would be the last. Everyone, it appears, is moving on. And so for this week are we. Thanks again to Miriam Ulalahi and Brent Impey, and to you for watching. We'll be back with Media7 at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.